And also, please use the chat to ask questions throughout the session. This is meant to be interactive. This is your time. And if we miss your question or we can't get to it, we'll follow up after. And because this is a Teams meeting, everyone has full control of audio and video. So please just be aware. We can hear you, we can see you. So make sure that you're muted. Just toggle through the slides. Yep. Just a quick note about iV4. If you're new to us, we're an IT consulting, security, cloud, and managed services organization located in upstate New York, in Syracuse, Rochester, and Buffalo. We're also recognized as a top Microsoft partner, so Teams is definitely right up our alley. We can help you with anything Teams, Office 365, Microsoft 365, and all that good stuff. Next slide. Today we have Alvin Rodriguez. He'll be walking us through Teams and demoing all the features and answering your questions. We also have two other iV4 team members on the call. Jacob Reinhardt, he's a senior engineer. We also have Lisa White, an account manager and certified CIE facilitator. So they'll be responding to your questions in the chat, and we might hear from them as well. And we also have two other webinars coming up this month. One is next week, May 13th, on return to work strategy. We'll be covering how to plan for the return to the office in the post-COVID world. And then later in the month, May 27th, we're talking about how to use Teams as your business phone. So talking about replacing PBX with cloud-based solutions and what that entails and what that looks like. You can sign up at iv4.com/events. We hope to see you guys there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elvin.
Thank you, Rebecca, and welcome everyone. I want to just before I get to the questions and start going through the list of questions, I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to approach this. So I'm going to talk through and demo as much as I can in answering the questions. Lisa and Jacob are going to be moderating, and they're going to chime in with any questions that they see in the chat that they deem, that it's for everyone's benefit to be able to listen to the answer of that question. The question, you can ask questions in the chat. They will try to answer on a one-on-one, and all this information is going to be available to you at the end of the call. So let's jump right into it. So one of the questions that was asked is, can you have more than one person included on a call? And the answer to that is yes, right? You can add a person, and I'm assuming that that question comes from a chat perspective. So if you're having a chat, a one-to-one chat, you can add a person to that chat. And I'm gonna just flip over here to the screen, and we're gonna go to chat. And in the upper right-hand corner here, if everyone can see kind of the pulsating mouse there, you can add a person to the chat, or you can add a person to the call. Right? So if we were in an existing call, you can add that person to the call. Right from there, if it's on the call itself, there's an ellipsis which gives you the option for the participants, and from once you click on that option on the upper right-hand corner, you can add people to the call. So let's go back to the slide deck. Now, the next three questions. Can you call someone outside of your organization, for instance, conference them in? We want to understand the team's ability to host online video and audio meetings, including both users and guests, and then understand the team's ability to host online video and meetings with external participants. So I'm going to approach this answer, and I'm going to try to answer all three questions with the same response. So can you call someone outside of can you conference them in outside of your organization? So the answer to that is yes. Now, there are a couple ways that you can that you can approach or have to set up. So, and let's distinguish those two. So there are there's external access, which is also known as federation, which is essentially external users. If you are searching for them, external users in others' domain, if you want to search for them and find them to call, chat, and set up a meeting, that can be done. You know, you would need to set up federation. So you would need to work with that organization to set up federation in order to do that. So external access is on by default in Teams, which means your organization can communicate externally. You can turn it off. You can include and exclude domains. Again, if there's a little bit more about that you would like to know in terms of configuration, best practices, we can have a admin workshop, I would say approximately an hour or two with one of our engineers to be able to review all of those settings with you and what are the best practices. Now, the next part of it is guest access. So guest access is basically trying to find an individual, trying to add an individual regardless of domain to a team, a chat, call, etc. So guest access is added to your organization's Active Directory, and basically once it's added, there are additional steps that can be taken from a configuration standpoint, but the bottom line is that you can communicate with external participants. You can communicate with the external participants in a guest capacity, let's call it. Jacob is going to put a link in the chat if he hasn't done that already, which basically covers external access, guest access. It gives you a comparison of external and guest access. So that way you can look through that information. Again, if you need additional assistance, we could definitely help you with that. And I would say roughly 1 or 2 hour workshop to go through Teams, the admin center in its entirety. So I'm going to pause there for a moment. Lisa and Jacob, any questions coming into the chat?
We've had one come in from Ron Norris, who's looking for some advice on using Teams to replace other forms of communication, so you don't have to keep checking other places. I think we will touch on that as we get more into the features, but if you want to touch on it now, we can.
Yeah, so let's wait a little bit on that one, but yeah, we are going to touch it. I might ask Jacob to chime in on that one. But yeah, as we go through the features, I think we're definitely going to cover some of that, and hopefully we'll answer Ron's questions.
Great.
All right. So now, the next question: how to best use channels chat to replace email, and how to use files efficiently. Now, basically what you're trying to accomplish, and what Microsoft is trying to accomplish with Microsoft Teams is it's one place that you can essentially communicate via call, via IM, and you can share files. Now, how can you best use those, right? And I think that the best way to approach that is if you're trying to have a focused conversation or a focused discussion about a specific topic, that is the perfect Teams is the perfect place to do that. Let's say that it's a project that has a life cycle, and you want to make sure that this specific project, all communications, the calls, the meetings, the conversation, the files are all in one place. You would create a project, a team, and name that team, Project X, and then you can also create some channels underneath the project, and that will allow you, as long as you're using the channels and you're using the team, you'll be able to better organize your information, manage the project, communicate the information. And the great thing about it is that the chats are persistent. You know, there's a log of all this information within that channel, within that team, versus it being, let's say, in an email, or let's say that you're using, you're trying to use another solution to manage the project, right? So the good thing about Teams is that it allows you to be able to communicate, have have the calls, share the files. If it's, I'll add on to that that if it's project management light, you could integrate it with, or you could use Planner. If it's a light project, that Planner gives you some options, and you can also integrate it with a third-party application that's a project management application, and all that will tie in nicely into that project itself. So the next question here is, can the Audible notification on mobile devices be changed? So the answer to that is it really depends on the mobile device itself. If it's an iPhone, if it's an Android, if it's a specific version of Android, that's really more dependent on the device itself. Can it be made to repeat every minute until the message is read? Yes, that can be done in a chat. And let me bring over Teams here for a moment. I can send Jacob a message, and I can set at the bottom here, where you have that exclamation point, where it's the mark for importance, you can mark that specific message urgent. Okay, so as you see, notify recipient every 2 minutes for 20 minutes. You could do that on your, you can also do that on your phone. And Jacob is also going to provide a link where it gives you specific instructions on how you can mark a message as important or as urgent. And you will have the two options there in terms of the instructions from a desktop and from a mobile device perspective. All right, so I'll pause there for a second. Jacob, Lisa, any questions from the audience? Any additional questions?
Doesn't look like at this time.
Okay. Now, can the next question here is, I'm having trouble sharing my screen in video conference calls. Jacob, have you come across any issues where you've been working with users where there's a known issue, or you've seen where there's particularly one specific area that's causing issues with sharing a screen in a video conference call?
Yeah, this is a good question to kind of bring up. Usually the problems that may happen with sharing screen are going to be in one of two areas. One is concerning the version of Teams that you're using. If you're using the desktop client, you will have fewer problems. If you're trying to share it in a web meeting that maybe you've joined, you have to be using Google Chrome or the latest version of Microsoft Edge. There's also some older browsers that may not support screen sharing. So there's the client side. But the second part of this has to do with policies, and Teams does provide the means to basically limit what kind of behaviors, what kind of sharing your users can do with people. Out of the box, it's fairly open, but just keep in mind that if someone is having problems, especially if they're outside of your organization, that there may be a policy restriction in place that could be making the user feel like it's not working. So those are kind of the two big areas, the client the user who's trying to share is using, and the policies, whether the user is even being permitted to share their screen in that meeting.
Thank you, Jacob. So those are the questions that we had that were submitted. I'm going to kick it back to you, Jacob, and I wanted for you to talk a little bit about, or answer Ron's question, and I think maybe you and I can both answer his question. Lisa, could you repeat the question? Because I think there were a certain piece that was left out in terms of the answer that I provided earlier as I was covering the features.
Absolutely. So Ron asked, he'd like some advice on using Microsoft Teams to replace other forms of communication so that it becomes a good replacement versus yet another place that you have to look.
Yeah, Jacob, can you chime in on that? Because I partially answered that, but I definitely want to get your take as an engineer from your perspective.
Yeah, when we're talking about using Microsoft Teams effectively, so much, believe it or not, has little to do with the technology side of it, and a lot of it has to do with user education. So I, as an engineer, am often thinking in terms of, okay, what do we need to do to make something work properly? And many of you may be IT admins yourself, that's where you live. But so much on using Teams effectively really has to do with helping users change their patterns. Email is a ubiquitous form of business communication. It has been around for well over 20 years. And for so many employees, there's this impulse that, there's email is kind of the thing. What I would suggest is, thinking in terms of email as much more general and like not needing much of a response is one means that I would say. Teams is the place where there's going to be a lot of, it's for a smaller group. Like even if it's a mini team or an internal team communication, that might be the kind of thing you would want to be trying to encourage people to use Teams for. But when we're talking about a wide, just general thing that requires no response, yes, we can do announcements in Teams, as was put in the chat by Rebecca, but there's that kind of a distinction between a targeted communication. That's where you want to be using Teams, where it's expecting a response. That's just kind of my observations, not even so much from the technical side, but me working in Teams myself in the day-to-day in my work for iV4.
Yeah, and I find that what really needs to be done is you get an understanding of your requirements and what your needs are, and then trying to find the best fit. In some instances, Team fits perfectly and it meets the needs of organizations. Usually smaller organizations. When we're talking about larger organizations, there might need to be some bolt-ons because of the different business workflows, right? And the executive decision has been made to leverage Team. They've gone through a proof of concept. They know it works, and let's say that 70-80% of Teams meets the needs of that specific organization. But now we're going to have to bolt on, some other solutions, and that's where, that's where I think the third-party apps come into play, where you can actually, add some third-party apps to potentially interface with Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. So again, that type. My recommendation there is, if you want to take a deeper dive, it's really, that could be, we offer a series of workshops. It could just be, a 2-hour workshop, a 4-hour workshop. It really depends how much you're trying to approach. We're about to kick off a a project with with one of our clients that wants to deploy team throughout the organization, right? So that's a little bit of a bigger project, but again, we can slice it, and if what's needed is just to get a general overview of deployment and general requirements and best practices, we could do that with you. We could certainly do that for you. It's 12:51. I do want to open it up for questions. So I would ask that if anyone has any questions and wants to unmute themselves and ask the question, you can do so now.
Alvin, we did have one question in the chat regarding the formatting of the chat and Teams. Maybe you could just kind of review that and how you got the box to expand and all that.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, so I'm gonna stick to this specific chat that I opened now. I'm gonna go ahead and close it, and let's go ahead and discard. So just to differentiate, okay, this is a private chat. It's one-to-one and one-to-many. Okay, you can do the same in the channels and the teams. The features are a little bit different in terms of what you have available to you as a feature. Okay, my suggestion to you is that you look at those and explore and cover those, and look for the differences on your own. I'll start with the chat here, and basically, when you're typing a message, if you want to expand the box, you're clicking on the rich text format editor. And once you're there, you have these options here. You have the ellipsis, which allows you to undo, repeat typing, insert table, and these other options here. This one, if you hover over these, you can insert a link. You can do some of the bulleted. You can do the indents. So there are definitely some options there. Again, it's not not as feature rich as Word, but you do have some options there. You can, as Rebecca was mentioning earlier, you can also do announcements from here or from the teams. That's one of the differences, actually. So let me go to one of the teams, and I'm kind of venturing out here a little bit. Let's go. All right. We're going to go to my team here, and we're going to now see the difference here. Now, in a channel, you can post an announcement. Everyone can reply. You can you and moderators can reply, and you can actually post in multiple channels. So you have that. You have more features because of the way that it's meant to designed to be used is differently. The one-to-one chat versus the posts, and if you can see, they call it posts here versus in the chat they call it a conversation. Some of these are again, there's a little bit of a difference, but not much. These pretty much stay the same. I would say the bulk of it is in this area here. The one other difference is you can actually do praise, and I'm going a little bit off topic here, but just want to show the differences within the chat and conversation. But you can do praise if you want to, send someone a badge of awesomeness because they've done a great job. Go ahead and do that. And I think that that's one of the cool features that you get within Teams and within the channels. But again, just know that there is a difference between the features in chat and the features in the channels themselves.
So Alvin, one other comment I'll give you there, if you want to just go back to just
Absolutely.
touch on one of the questions too about files, like the most effective way to use files is keep in mind that whether it's a one-to-one chat, like Alvin has on the screen here, or it's in a channel, both of them have this a files tab where stuff can be uploaded. And if you look at the where like the rich text button was in the conversation starter, there's also a paperclip down there. That's where you can even attach, and you notice how there's the various options where you can pick a file that's already in the Teams area that's in OneDrive, or you just upload it from your computer. So when we think about using Teams effectively, it's more about realizing that people don't have to go to their email to send an attachment to work on it with people. In fact, it's much more better to say, okay, we have this file we need to work on, upload it in that chat or upload it in the channel if it's going to be a wider thing, because once it gets uploaded here, you get access to co-authoring as well, where two people can be on the same file editing it together. You just might have to use the web version of Teams, or if you're running the latest Teams client, or you might have to be running the latest version of Office from Microsoft 365. So it's helping people to realize that there's this new, better way to collaborate on a file together within Teams, and helping to unlock their ability to just work much more effectively. So I just wanted to touch on the file sharing side of things.
Yep. Thank you, Jacob. I think that's a great point. One thing that I do, and we're approaching the end here, and I have a few slides that I want to cover towards the end. One thing that I do want to mention is, Teams files in Teams live in OneDrive and or in SharePoint. Okay, and I want to talk specifically and briefly about SharePoint, because if you're already in SharePoint online and you're using Teams, and you already have document libraries in SharePoint, and you create a team, you're actually creating a new document library. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details, but that's one of the things that iV4 brings to the table in terms of providing guidance in terms of managing data, securing data with policies, data governance, because now you have data that's living in two different places, right? So, and the policies are not necessarily going to apply equally to the same. So you can apply those policies, but from a business standpoint, you really need to look at that part of it and not forget that now these files that maybe were being saved in this SharePoint online library that was already in place before you started using Teams, and now they're being shared in a project that now they're living in a different location, right? So it's just something to put out there to let you think about that as you're going through this process. Any more questions?
Alvin, we do have one gentleman has asked, we have the need for a one-time use web meeting tool to use with our customers and or business associates. Is Teams the right platform for this type of use?
So a one-time, I guess I'm trying to understand the question, or just a one-time use?
Jason, if you're comfortable, would you like to unmute to expand a little bit?
Sure, thank you. This is Jason. My question is we have the need to be able to reach out to our customer base and do proposals over the web. Right now we use a paid service, but we have Teams, and we were wondering if Teams is the right platform to be able to set up and do that. We don't want to be heavy on the side of the customer and require that we add them as a guest user to our system or anything like that. So I'm just wondering, is Teams even a possibility for this type of use?
Jacob, I'm going to defer to you to answer that, because I think there's more of a technical limitation perspective or area here.
Yeah, Jason, that's a good mindset. Because you want to minimize the footprint. I think I can kind of point to this very meeting as an example of that. We are using Teams here to connect with, our customer base. And so you can all see where we did not have to add any of you as a guest user to our tenant, and you were able to join this meeting. So I definitely believe the answer is yes. Teams can meet your needs for customer facing communications. You just want to be sensitive to where, maybe it would make sense for certain types of customer interactions where it would make sense to kind of set up a team with external access. And it would be involving a customer thing where sometimes having the audio conferencing add-on, and that kind of leads into just these quick slides we're going to cover here. It's kind of for those external customers where sometimes they're more comfortable doing, if it's not going to involve any sharing of anything, that's where potentially an audio conferencing add-on could be a useful, convenience to your clients to be able to join meetings in this nature. Does that help, Jason? Any follow-up comment?
I think so. The big question that still remains is, I obviously that the customer or the recipient of this needs to have something on their end to connect with, and I'm assuming that that's the Teams application.
Yes, except keep in mind that each meeting can be joined from a web client. The Teams web client in their browser is basically completely in feature equivalence with the desktop client. So we do that with our clients frequently where people join using the web browser. So just keep that in mind that there's no need for additional software. If a user clicks the join Microsoft Teams meeting link that Alvin's got on the screen here, if they click that and they don't have Teams installed on their computer, they will just be prompted to essentially to join that call in the web browser.
Perfect. That's the answer I'm looking for. Thank you. I appreciate the detail.
Yeah, some users still struggle with it. We've been doing this for years, even with Skype. Sometimes they still have to get talked through it, but it's usually nothing that a meeting host can't handle. So I feel like you're in a good position with
that. Thank you, Jacob. And yeah, so that, as Jacob mentioned, that link is the key there. The audio conferencing number, so you also have that capability, and that's a good segue to this Teams licensing slide. So here, these are the Office 365 plans with access to Teams. As you can see there, it's the business sector and the enterprise sector. And if you have, as Jacob alluded, if you have Office 365, you can use the browser. So if you are, one use case for that is if you are a guest, you can actually connect using the web browser as the guest to the vendor, or, in our case, it's Microsoft, or a client, or a partner, and you could just use the client version for just your internal. So organizations without add-on license have, Teams only group and one-on-one audio or video calling, one-to-one and group chat, video sharing capabilities, co-authoring, and storage. We do offer licensing workshops. So if there's a Microsoft, if there are questions that you have about licensing, it could be as short of a 15 to 30-minute workshop call, or a 1 hour if you just want a comprehensive overview and optimization essentially of your license. We could certainly tee that up for you. Teams licensing, so phone system is $8 user a month. That's for any PSTN connectivity, and it's required for the purchase of calling plans and add-ons. Audio conferencing, as we just talked about, is $4 a month. You need to set up the audio conferencing. Those are the unique access codes for each meeting, and those are, you get 60 minutes per user for those specific for that $4 audio conferencing. Then you have the calling domestic plans, $12 and $24 user per month. At the bottom there's a little footnote. When the allocated minutes, those 60 minutes, are used up, the customer will need to purchase communication credits to continue to use the PST and conferencing for the rest of the calendar month. There's also some additional information on the right in terms of enabling conference calls. Very similar to what you see on the left. I will add that if you're in a nonprofit organization, it's a little bit cheaper, $1.60 and $3.20. This is a breakdown of the free versus paid, and as you could easily see, you could on the list there, the comparison, schedule meetings, recording, and the rest of the 3 features there. And that is the end of the slides. We're 6 minutes over, so my apologies for going a little bit over. Do we have any questions at this point? If not, I'll kick it over to Rebecca.
Yep, looks like we got all the questions answered. So with that, we're going to conclude our office hours. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and look this afternoon for the follow-up recording and slide deck.
Thank you, everyone.